Your songs don't come from nowhere, so you always have more to talk about. When I write music, I'm not trying to come up with what to say. I used to. That was, if I think back, I started writing songs when I was probably 13 or 14 years old. It was over a decade before I recorded my first song, or even performed my first song as a solo performer. I had a lot to work through, a lot of fear of being seen. Some of that turned out to be legitimate. I'm thankful for the journey I've taken and the strength it's given me for sure. But it's all because over time, as I committed myself more and more to releasing myself into my art, I came to terms with the fact that I'm not really writing lyrics, if that makes sense. Or maybe that's the wrong emphasis. Maybe I'm not writing lyrics. It's funny. I have had experience taking a poetry class, and I was told that I was either not taking the class seriously or I was just expressing such a plain language style that he had never seen the likes of, right? And this is a published poet. And I credit that class with really changing the way that I think about my creative output. And that was years before. I mean, I was in a band then. We didn't really record. We recorded, one live show, and then broke up in tremendous fashion. And I learned a lot from that as well. And that is kind of sounds like a tangent, but it's all leading back to, back then when I was in that band, I was struggling to find the words. I was even struggling to find out what to talk about. Most of the songs were love songs, which is easy. It's all I really had on my mind for a lot of other reasons, because I was a loose woman, in, as my grandmother might say. um, Perhaps a little too loose. Definitely a little way too loose. It's and I learned a lot from that too. And it's funny because every time I feel like I'm about to go on a tangent, it wraps back around to what I'm trying to say. It's almost an exact expression of what I am trying to say, which is that your art does not come from nowhere, right? It comes from experience. It comes from the moments that you have shared with nobody but yourself. Not that there aren't other people there, but we're all perceiving things differently. I took the COVID pandemic very seriously. Some people can't afford not to take it seriously to this day. Um, some people never took it seriously to begin with, right? We were all there for that. I processed a tremendous amount of societal trauma, guilt for previous inaction, um, disgust at the way I'd let myself be misled by people who have a lot of money invested in making sure that minds like mine don't work right, you know, and none of us are immune to that. Some of us are inoculated from it by means of knowing people. I didn't have that luxury. A lot of the, a lot of the people from my hometown, they look the same, they think the same, they act the same. And I'm grateful for that experience too. because all of these experiences, they combine together into what I know. And what I know manifests itself through my art, whether I wanted to or not. You know, I've listened to songs that I wrote, some of the first songs I recorded back in 2019, which as of the time of recording is like 6 or 7 years ago. And I was saying some things that I relate to now. I was hinting at things I relate to now that I didn't understand back then, if that makes sense, which it might not, because it didn't make sense to me then. Why would it? You know, if you're just starting out on your journey, I wasn't thinking about all this back then. I was just writing what came to me. You know, when I started my solo project in 2019, which became a band, which then became more of a solo project again, yet another story for another time. It's all it was all in an effort to get the songs that were in my head out of my head, because I never considered the songs that were in my head valuable. You know, those are just the ones that are just bouncing around. They're just stupid little ditties. You know, that's not what you show other people. That's what you you know, feel shame about, and then you write something that tries to be way cooler than that other people are gonna dig. You know, and it's, man, you you fooled you only fooling yourself. That's what I've learned, and I'm thankful for that too. Right, because all of these experiences, they all combine into who I am today. And learning to write music like that, not trying to control what it is, but just trying to document who I am in that moment, it frees up a lot of baggage. It frees up a whole lot of processing power. Oh my God. If 6 years had gone by and I still hadn't written down the like 5 or 6 songs that wouldn't stop bouncing around my head in 2019, I mean, I don't know. They would have popped it eventually. I would have had to start making music or something, right? Like I would have had to find an outlet, because this is the outlet that has changed my life. It has helped me become who I am, which is someone who I'm proud of for, you know, maybe the first time in my life. Maybe since maybe since I was a kid, maybe since I was 8 or 9 years old. And I can't say I'm thankful for that, right? Like, but I wouldn't be who I am without it. And knowledge of that level of self-defeating hatred for yourself, I mean, it ricochets out to others, right? There's people who are very good at hiding how much they hate themselves, and there are people who are very bad at hiding how much they hate others. And I think those people have a lot in common. You know, they're just two sides of the same coin, or two poles of the same axis. And if you don't work through that, it is going to eventually demolish your life. You know, it demolished my life so many times. I think I don't know, because there's a lot of people I don't really get to talk to anymore. I never really figured out what I did wrong. I can guess, you know, it was generalized asshole disorder. It wasn't because I was trying to be, you know, but that's not their job to interpret for me, you know. I'm thankful for that too. But if I had to guess why a lot of my friendships fell off throughout the years, it was because I portrayed myself as a certain kind of person who I couldn't maintain. You know, I was trying to pretend to be this person who had it together. And I liked to pretend that I was good at hiding it, right? And maybe I was for a little bit, but people would always see the cracks eventually, and they'd start to think, what else is he hiding? And the truth is, you know, Not much, but a lot of trauma, a lot of unprocessed grief that I was always told wasn't right for the moment, or wasn't important, or I should think about someone else instead. It's fucking it's a trap, right? And that's actually, that became my most popular song on streaming, which, I mean, we're talking like since 2020, end of 2021, it's gotten 5,000 streams or so. So real, real slow burn. But people really like that song, and people really relate to it. And I can't help but think that it is because it is something of a blueprint for undoing your own cage, or at least a first step. I mean, that whole album, it was kind of meant to be. It was like I was escaping prison, in a mental prison. Not to, uh, not to compare my experience to American prison, right? But we do keep ourselves in some ways limited by the things that we tell ourselves about what we can and can't do, and there are things that we legitimately can and can't do as well. And here I go adding nuance to something that, like, the right people are just, they're just gonna know that I don't mean every single situation, right? It's like this pissing contest. I don't even remember what I was talking about now. Oh yeah, it was kind of like I was escaping from this mental prison, and I was leaving a map behind as I left, right? But a lot of people, that kind of emotional processing, that's not how they think about music. Or maybe they do and they don't. Maybe they just have different emotions from me. But I don't denigrate theirs, and I've had a lot of people denigrate my music, right? Which is another thing I'm thankful for, because it's taught me how to really truly just have confidence in my own taste. It's like, okay, if I show one person, they say it's the best song they've ever heard, and I show five other people and they all say it's shit. Whose opinion matters more, right? Like the five people who you just minorly pissed off, or maybe they were trying to piss you off, or the one person whose life you just changed. It's like this. I don't know. It's funny, right? Because the song that I'm talking about, "Walls Come Crashing" by Atlas and Oracle, it is deep in its own way, but it's also, it uses cliches to get there. One of the things that I learned at some point is that some of the phrases that we refer to as cliches are not untrue. They're just, you've heard it so many times, it's meaningless. It becomes meaningless, right? It's like, you can even do that with your own name. Repeat it enough times, it starts to lose its value to you as a phonetic signifier, right? It's like this crazy psychology. And so you hear these cliches enough times, and it starts to bounce off you. It starts to feel like, this is bullshit. If this could have helped, it would have. But I think a lot of people miss the value in some of these lessons until they have triggered the event that makes it meaningful to them personally. Uh, I don't know if that's like a bad thing, right? It might just be the way that humans work, right? They need some kind of personal hook. They need some kind of reason to care about something outside of themselves, or a bridge to realize that something outside of themselves is meaningful to them in a way that maybe they hadn't realized, because we're all rushing around and don't have 5 seconds to think for ourselves, it feels like. But when you do take that time, you start to learn lessons that seem so simple, that, like, you it's revelatory. But then you tell someone and they're like, I found that out when I was 11 years old. Like, okay. Well, no one told me, that would have changed my life at 11 years, or maybe it wouldn't have, right? Maybe it would have bounced off and I would have thought I got it, and then I wouldn't have actually got it until I was in my late 20s, who knows? I'm thankful for that uncertainty, right? It's like, if you, it is so easy to say, "Oh, I should have known. I should have known that. How dare I make a mistake? How dare I not be perfect?" But all of that is bunk. Is they that's literally how they convince you to beat yourself down before they have to do anything. It's this ridiculous imprisonment of psyche that keeps us trapped. And I think one of the thing that I mainly wanted to talk about today is this imprisonment of the psyche, where musicians think that they have nothing to say. Because it's not true. If you can write a song, you can write an essay. Not like, I'm not saying like MLA formatted, 2 pages, double space. I don't care. Like, that's not like, when I say essay, I just mean like you are able to formulate your thoughts in a cohesive enough way that it signifies that you're able to hold cause and effect in your mind and talk about it. And if you are embarrassed to talk about the songs that you were writing, there could be a good reason for that. There could be a bad reason for that. Either you're afraid of being found out, or you're afraid of being seen, which can be a trauma response. And you can't even trust all the people who talk a big game and like it matches with the music, because sometimes they're found out to be um, living a double life, to say the least. But there's a lot of us who are convinced that we are living double lives who aren't, if that makes sense. While the rest of these people who actually are living double lives confidently get to run around and make the rules. And this is kind of like, if I had to slap one main thesis on Atlas and Oracle, it is that the rules matter less than the interactions that you have and what you learn from them. I think it's true. I think there are all, you can say all these things about, oh, the right strategy. You need the right strategy for what you're gonna do. You need to, like, oh, no one's even gonna see it if I don't post 4 times a day every single day. And sell myself out, and I feel scummy doing it because I'm just looking for likes and attention. It's like, how did you just completely talk yourself into someone else's like perception of you in 3 sentences? It's like, how did you box yourself in so thoroughly that you have convinced yourself that your music doesn't deserve to be promoted, but the people who do that scummy behavior, their music does, because they can do it authentically, or at least be perceived that way? Is like this is it's just, it bothers me so much, because like it even leaks into the way that musicians see each other. They're like, oh, look at that scumbag, like promoting his music the way that I wish I kind of wish I could, but they're doing it, and I would do it better than them. Or it's like they're like they're like, what the hell is he even doing? Like, that's not one of the 5 approved strategies. Like, it's like this ridiculous like conforming factor to the way that musicians think about, like, they're like, oh, I can't sell out, and I can't, like, the selling out thing, that's like kind of in the head, and like the material thing is real. Is like, okay, I can't make money doing what I love, so I have to sell out. But I feel shitty selling out, so I'm not gonna do anything. Oh, it's like, uh, that didn't go the direction I was expecting, right? like, what if you could authentically promote yourself without selling out? And I think the way that you do that is by writing about things that matter to you, which requires knowing what matters to you, or at least being willing to figure it out as you write, which is all I did. I think we just crossed 55 songs, which is crazy because there's 10 that aren't even on Spotify. And those are maybe even some of the most important ones to my personal growth, those early ones where I just didn't know the rules. I didn't care. I just kind of was making what sounded fun to me and put a lot of thought into making it sound right. And who even cares what right means? Because it meant something to me, and they hold up in a way that, like, they're still meaningful to me. I could sit here and talk for half an hour about each and every one. And I think the people who let cliches bounce off of them, they don't realize that there is a hidden depth to things like that. Like, sometimes I'll say something, and if questioned on it, I could provide sources, I could provide perspectives, I could provide historical analysis, I could talk about it at length. But people either just kind of move. They don't quite get it. They don't quite latch onto it, so they move on, or they're like what? Like, no, that's not what I've heard, and they like talk about something irrelevant, or maybe like what they say as a contradiction is actually baked into what I was saying, and they just don't they haven't thought about it, and they decided not to think about it. They decided to come at something they didn't understand instead. I think that's telling behavior. I don't think those people make good artists. I think the good artists, they're the ones who can take what they're feeling and turn it into something that makes other people feel as well. And I don't think there's really any limits to that, right? It's like, what should you write music about? What can you write music about, right? Like, what do you feel right now that you need to get out of your heart and your head and your soul, or else it is going to become heavier and heavier. And then if you do it like that, unless you think that you're somehow perfect or someday going to reach perfection, you will always have more art. Right? I think a lot of the reason that we see people selling out and we decide that they've lost their touch is because they have different needs, right? Their problems change. And they do become out of touch, right? And then it's like they were writing about their problems, and then all their problems went away. Well, that's a pretty efficient way to neutralize it. Someone who's pretty good at talking about problems, and we've seen it happen. That's a long story. Well researched. Yeah, no, it's this ridiculous concept that somehow writing the music is okay, but if I then talk about the music, that's crossing a line. Okay. It's a great way to make sure that as few people hear your music as possible. It's like, that's fine. That's fine. There is nothing wrong with that. Unless it distresses you, right? Like, that's the thing, is people will work themselves into these corners and they will distress themselves, and they will distressfully decide that there's nothing that they can do. So they're just going to keep sitting with that stress. It's like, my friend, write a song. Write a song about how this makes you feel, because clearly it's making you feel all sorts of ways. And then talk about it, right? It's like, your songs don't come from nowhere. This is what I've been trying to say. They don't come from nowhere. They come from experience. And since they come from experience, there's always more experience to be had, right? It's like, oh my God. One of the cliches I threw into Wallace Come Crashing on that note is that I've been around the world and nothing thrills me, right? Like that is such a hilarious lyric for like someone in their early 20s to write with complete earnestness. Fortunately, it wasn't completely earnest. I knew even at the time, I knew that it was a little bit silly, right? But I knew that people would relate to it, and it was how I felt, right? I knew it wasn't how I was gonna feel forever. I knew it couldn't be. I knew there had to be more to life than that, and that's what I've been trying to prove ever since: is that there is more to life that you haven't seen, and if you decide that you've seen it all too early, then you will miss so much. And that's kind of what the rest of the album is about, right? Is like the rest of Jubilee as it goes on. If you see it as a concept album, which I kind of do, I kind of see all my music as concept. They're all kind of packaged lessons and story arcs. And am I the main character? You know, who knows? It's all a facade, right? So could be could be an act. As I talk about the extremely real experiences that led to some of the lyrics. I'm just saying, you know, you can't like read my lyrics and learn everything about me. You're gonna make yourself look like a fool. But there is a lot there that I can talk about because I know where it came from because it was my experience. You know, it's like I'm not gonna sit here and talk about how your song is bullshit because oh, that's not how I perceive their life to have gone. Like, okay, well, it is. It's possible that things happen that you didn't expect. You know, it's like this mentality of being around the world and seeing it all and deciding that it's you know it's all for nothing. You might as well just toss it to the side and sit here in misery and agony. Like yeah, you can do that. That's fine, but you will be in misery and agony. Like that's and, and people look at me. Oh my gosh, people look at me and they decide like, oh, this is a guy who does not know misery. He knows neither misery nor agony. I'm certain of it just by looking at him. It's like, first of all, not even a him, not really. And second of all, that among other problems, that, that among other aspects of my life were made into problems by a tremendous number of people, almost all of them. I don't know what to tell you. Um, People make me suffer to prove that I don't know what suffering is, and it's like, uh, I, that's a long. I mean, that's what some of the most recent stuff is about, right? Is like this life after deception and on is kind of about finding out how many of the people in my life were using me for clout or reputation or to make themselves feel better. They would make up stories about me. It's like yeah, that's a bummer, but I turned it into a song. Now what are you gonna do? Now it's a now that ephemeral moment is solidified from my perspective, and you can't change it. You know, you can't gaslight me once I've written a song, and you can't stop me from talking about it. So as Jubilee goes on, that's kind of what the narrator starts to realize is that music is not a simple experience. It's highly complex. Everyone experiences it differently. Sometimes there are references in songs that you won't get. Sometimes you look it up and you're like, oh, I get it now. Sometimes you meet someone and you're like, oh, I looked it up and I got it now. And they never realized there was anything to look up and get. You know, I used to be kind of like that. I didn't like lyrics that were vague. vague but specific. It's like I didn't like that Oxford comma song by Vampire Weekend because it's like vague, but I don't. It's not like abstract. It's not applicable to anything, right? It may be certain individual lines, and then you find out years later it was written about like a very real thing that they were not covering up, but not like exposing either. Um, and I hated that. I was like, I've seen those English dramas too. Like I haven't seen them, so what's the two for? You're disputing with someone who I have nothing to do with, and I don't particularly feel like I'm you either, right? So like this strange experience. But like if something is vague in a way that is applicable, it's like abstracted. It becomes a lesson. It becomes something that you can teach and talk about at length because you have done that work for yourself to understand your own experiences. And in the end, you're the only one who can. There is no way to live someone else's experience. Two people can watch the same person suffer, and one of them says that person needs help, and the other person says, "What a weak little bitch. I'm gonna kick them." I've experienced way more of the latter. Don't mean to indict humanity, but I, if you look through my life story, you find an amazing number of people who sat by and said, "That's so funny," and shockingly few who extended a hand and said, "Do you need help?" you know, would you be open to feedback? No, no one ever asks that. Most people aren't, I've learned. I've never gone around assuming that they wouldn't be, though. I've actually assumed that they would be open to feedback. That's gotten me into trouble, too. So I get it. I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful to be someone who sought the feedback myself, who said something must be wrong. And then put in work to get myself closer to how I wanted to be, how I saw myself. And some of it is time, but time doesn't heal all wounds. Not alone. There's other things you need to do. You need to process. You need to feel your feelings. And that's another cliche, right? But it holds a deep, deep truth that if you just let them build up, if you don't turn them into satisfying expressions, they will start to rot. They will decay inside you. And what happens after then is unpredictable. So it's not just even every song that you can talk about. It's almost every line, unless you're telling cohesive stories. Even then, depending on how you're doing it, like you know that as a musician, you know this better than anybody, is that every line you write is loaded with meaning. And if you don't think that, then you might be early on in your journey, or you might have a different philosophy from me. I remember, uh, probably what some of my friends would consider a nail in the coffin for why we eventually stopped talking. Is I was speaking of Oxford comma, is like not knowing why I specifically didn't like it. There were a lot of things like that. I would get angry because people would be like, "Oh, that's so deep," and I'd be like, "That's like third grade. Like, what are we doing here?" It's just like, "Oh, it's such a nice metaphor." It's like metaphors are for kids, like, oh, they're referencing Greek mythology. Like I referenced Greek mythology when I was 5. Like, but it's it's multifaceted, right? It's like people hear me saying stuff like that and they say this guy doesn't respect me because he doesn't respect what I like. He doesn't like what I like. Or they're thinking he doesn't respect the people who I like, and that's disrespectful to me, or I find that disrespectful even if it isn't directed at me. Whatever the meaning. Um that's how a lot of people will see it, but for me, that turned out to just be a frustrated drive to create. I knew more than I had done. And it made me angry almost, to see other musicians succeeding while I thought that I was like better than them. I was like, yeah, I still think I'm better than Vampire Weekend, and I actually like them a lot more now. But they're not for me, right? They're for Vampire Weekend fans, and that's why I had to exist, because there are people who like my music who wouldn't have known that without me, and I hope they connect to not just the songs but the lessons.